All right, there are still people still joining us from the parking lot, but we're just going to start with our service. They're slowly coming in, but we'll be able to welcome them with some nice songs as they're coming into our building. Welcome everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to start our service on page 46 of our Siddurim. Page 46 of our Siddurim. So actually, I'm sorry, not page 46. Give me just a moment. That would be our morning service.
No, we have a different one, right?
No, that's the morning service.
Yeah, page 5, right?
Yes, we're going to be starting on page 6 of our Siddurim. Page 6 of our Siddurim. With Shalom Aleichem, page 6. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharei, Malachei El Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bolechem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei El Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Ni L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei El Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seitchem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei El Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Page 7 of our Siddurim, we join together with the responsive reading. Come, let us welcome Shabbat. Light is the symbol of the divine. Light is the symbol of the divine within us. Light is the symbol of the divine law. Light is the symbol of Israel's mission. Page 8 of our Siddurim, we're going to be lighting the Shabbos candles. Would anyone like to volunteer for the Shabbos candles? Otherwise, I'll light them. Here in the past, they've been a little bit of a challenge to light.
I'll say the prayer if you like.
All right, come on up. Liz, come on up. Actually, we can, well, if you'd like to first say the responsive reading, this will be fine.
Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, O eternal our God, who makes our lives holy through divine mitzvot and has commanded us to kindle the Shabbat lamp.
Amen.
May the Eternal bless us with Shabbat joy.
Amen.
May the Eternal bless us with Shabbat peace.
Amen.
May the Eternal bless us with Shabbat holiness.
Amen. Did we read this one?
You read it, right?
Okay, good. So we got it. Shkoyach. Thank you. Shkoyach. Now I'm going to turn to page 9 of our Siddurim for Lachadodi. Page 9 of our Siddurim for Lachadodi. Lechadodi likrakala yadada 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela lechadodi likrakala yadada 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela shamor b'zachur b'dibur echad Hishmeyanu el hanuchad Adonai echad u'shamo echad Lishem multiferet beli tehila Lechaydodi likrakala yadada 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela lechaydodi likrakala yadada 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela Likrat Shabbat lechu v'necha ki hi mekor habracha merosh mikedem nesuka sof ma'asa b'makshra tehila lechaydodi likrat kala yadada 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 b'nei Shabbat Nekavela ahale Chaydoi dili krakala yadada b'nei Shabbat Nekavela Hi ori Kiva ore kumi ori shir daveri kavod Adonai alai nigila lech aidoi zili krakala yadada b'nei Shabbat nekavela lech aidoi zili krakala yadada b'nei Shabbat nekavela. Now we rise and face the entrance or exit of our building as we welcome in the Shabbos bride. Boi v'shalom atzeret ba'ala Gam besimcha uvetzola Tov emune am segula Boi kala Lech aidoi zili krakala Yadada b'nei Shabbat Nekavela Lech aidoi zili krakala Yadada b'nei Shabbat Nekavela. Remain standing now for the Hatzi Kaddish on page 11 of our Siddurees. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabba V'yalma divrach yireteviam lich malchutei B'chayechon u'v'yoymechon u'chayedecho Beit Yisrael V'agala u'vizman karim V'yameru Amen Ya'esh mei Rabba mevorach Le'al yamilal me'amaya Yitzbarach v'yishtabach v'yishba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei l'kudusha v'rechu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran mi'alma v'yameru Amen. Page 12, we join together for the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Page 13, we join together in English with the italicized text in English. Eternal God, your majesty is proclaimed by the marvels of earth and sky. Sun, moon, and stars testify to your power and wisdom. Day follows day in endless succession, and the years vanish, but your sovereignty endures. Though all things pass, not let your glory depart from us. Help us to become co-workers with you and endow our fleeting days with abiding worth. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. Blessed are you, O Eternal, who brings on the evening. Page 14, we join together for the translation for Avat Olam. With eternal love you've loved your people Israel, the house of Israel, Torah and commandments, statutes and judgments you've taught us. Therefore, O eternal our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will discuss your statutes and rejoice in the words of your Torah and your commandments forever. For they are our lives and they lengthen our days, and we will meditate upon them day and night. May you never remove your love from us forever and ever. Blessed are you, O Eternal, who loves God's people, Israel. Page 15, we join together for the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Ma'ilchuto Leolam Va'ed. You may be seated for the V'yahavta on page 16. V'yahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu ha'devarim ha'eleh asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinatan levanecha v'dibarta bam V'shiticha v'beitecha u'v'letecha v'derech u'shachbecha u'kumecha u'kshartam li'ot al yadecha והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם amen. Page 17, we join together once again for a responsive reading. Eternal truth is that you alone are God and there is none else. Let them beat their swords into plowshares. Let nation now lift up sword against nation. Let them study war no more. Let the stranger be into you as the native, for you are once strangers in the land of Egypt. From the house of bondage we went forth to freedom, so all be free. Page 18, we join together from Micha Mocha. Micha Mocha, Lalim Adonai. Micha Mocha, Nedar Kodesh, Nora Teilot, Osei Fele. Malchut Zechara Ubanecha, Vokeyam Lifnei Moshe. Ze Eli Anu V'Amru Adonai Yimloch Le'olam Va'ed V'Nemar Kifar Adonai Et Yaakov V'Lo Miyad Hazach Mimenu Baruch Atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. Page 19, we'll join together the translation for Hashkivenu with the responsive reading. Cause us, O eternal our God, to lie down in peace and to awaken us each morning, to renew life with strength. Spread over us the holy shelter of your peace. Help us to rule our lives with your counsel. Lead us in paths of righteousness. Be a shield about us, protecting us from any war, from pestilence and sorrow. Curb also within us the inclination to do evil and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Guard our going out and our coming into life with peace from this time forth, forever. Blessed are you, O eternal, so we shall shelter peace over us, over all God's people Israel. Page 20, we join together for Vishamru. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael es ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותיים ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותיים ברית עולם בני ישראל אותי לעולם אותי לעולם אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותיים ברית עולם כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותיים ברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותיים ברית עולם. We now rise for the Amidah prayer. Tefillah begins on page 21 of our Siddur readings. Adonai sefatai titachu fi agita iloteta Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotzeinu v'imoteinu Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanorah, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Toivim, V'konei HaKol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, Umevig Ilah Lifnei Pnechem, Leman Shemo B'Yahava, Melech Ozer Moshiach Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Be'ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Li'olam Adonai, Mechayei HaKol Atah Rabbe Hoshia, Mashivo Ruach Umarid HaGeshem, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayei HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Saimech Noiflim Berofei Cholim, Omatir Asarim, Omekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Micha Mocha Bal Kivurot, Umidam Melach, Melech Memit, Omechayei, Omatmiach Yeshua, Vene'eman Atah Ha'ayot HaKol. Baruch Atah Adonai Mechayei HaKol. Atah Kadosh V'Shim HaKadosh V'Koshim B'chol Yom Yahalilu Chasela. Baruch Atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. We daven silently until we join together on page 29 for Oseh Shalom. now join together for Oseh Shalom on page 29. Oseh Shalom Mimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Imru Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael. V'yemeru Amen. So in just a moment, I'm going to be inviting Amy Simon to begin speaking for us. She is our guest speaker online. I'm going to be pushing the computer screen in front of the podium right here, and we'll be able to ask questions as well as hear a little bit about the discussion. As a brief introduction, though, Amy Simon holds the William and Audrey Farber Family Chair in Holocaust Studies and European Jewish History at Michigan State University. Her work on Holocaust fiction, memoir, and diaries and pedagogy has appeared in Holocaust Studies, a Journal of Culture and History, Jewish Historical Studies, and the Journal of Jewish Identities, as well as several edited volumes. Her book, Emotions in Yiddish Ghetto Diaries, Encountering Persecutors and Questioning Humanity, is forthcoming in June 2023. And with that, I'm going to introduce her in just a second.
They were making itself a congregation, and they wanted to make a tourist road and the covering for the original, whatever it is, really, because
Hi, Amy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep, I'm going to push the screen out so everyone can see you. Just a second.
Okay.
No, we're gonna be, yeah, it's gonna be closer than this.
see the two of you. Just got a new language. Wasn't fitting right. That's the other one.
Okay, very good. Now I'm just going to bring that in front of the congregation. So through the miracles of technology, we've accomplished teleporting our guests here with us from Michigan. So we'll just make sure there it is. Also, so our online guests will be able to join. She'll be back in just a second. There you go.
I remember when that storm came from that, that's when they had the room. That talk, like 3 different locations, people you saw.
All right, Amy, can you hear me?
I wanted to go out a long time.
Okay, so I've already introduced you, and now is your opportunity to share with us some of your scholarship, and you should be able to see pretty much everyone there. All right, go ahead.
Yes, cool.
Welcome, Amy.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, if only virtually. It's a very busy time of the semester. We have 2 weeks left of class, and so everything is winding up, and we had our Jewish Studies undergraduate research conference today, getting to hear from our amazing students. So just a lot going on at Michigan State. So I'm glad to be able to join over Zoom. I'm glad that we have this technology, and we all, the one of only very few good things to come from COVID is at least the ability to connect a little bit better in our world. So I'm very glad to see you all, and I'm very glad to be here on the occasion of the Shabbat before Yom HaShoah. As the rabbi mentioned, I imagine I'm the endowed chair in Holocaust Studies and European Jewish History at Michigan State University. And since I was a junior in college, it has been my mission to educate about the Holocaust, first through working at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and then now, of course, as a professor at Michigan State. And so, not only educating about the Holocaust in terms of teaching classes and speaking to audiences like you, but of course also researching and publishing in my particular area of expertise and interest, which is Holocaust diaries. So that's what I'll talk about now for the amount of time that we have slated for us is the work that I've been doing over the last 15 years with Holocaust Diaries, which will be published in a book, my very first book, on June 16th. So I'm very excited about this after very many years of blood, sweat, and tears on the project. And the title of the book, as I'm sure you heard, is Emotions in Yiddish Ghetto Diaries, Encountering Persecutors and Questioning Humanity. And so my interest really was in, and has always been, not just in the basic questions of Holocaust history that people, most people ask, most students ask, how could it happen? Why did it happen? What does it mean that it happened? What was the process of genocide? How did good people participate in such a horrible crime, those kinds of questions. I've always been much more interested as a Jewish person in the Jewish experience, right? And understanding what was it really like? And of course, we can never get to what it was like if we weren't there. And I am glad that I wasn't there. My family does not have a direct link to the Holocaust, for which I'm actually quite grateful. But that to me is the essential kind of humanity of what it means to learn about the Holocaust and think about the Holocaust. To really understand it, you have to know something, not just about like bureaucratic processes and laws and how things developed, but the people and the experiences that they had on a regular basis, a day-to-day basis, right? It wasn't just that one day everybody, was sent into concentration camps, but rather there were years and years of persecution, all of which impacted people, even in the lead up to that. And in fact, many people, and the diarists that I'm going to speak about, many of the people that died in the Holocaust, of course, never made it to a concentration camp, right? They were killed along the way in so many other forms of persecution and murder. And so I was really interested, right, is to get away from just the quintessential kind of Holocaust experience that's in camps, which of course I also study and I teach and is such an important part of Holocaust history. But what I was really interested in for my research to delve deeper into was kind of daily suffering. And for me, the venue for that that was kind of the most interesting were the ghettos. And so the reason I thought about looking at ghettos in particular for deeper research is that I see this as kind of like this gray area in between, of course, the freedom of pre-war life and people just living their lives, and then of course the ultimate constriction and complete restriction of freedom in the concentration camps. And this kind of period, and it's not just a period because, right, for some people they're in ghettos for a few months, for other people they're in ghettos for a few years. People are in ghettos and then are in camps. So there's a lot going on over the historical period, but the ghettos themselves functioned, as I'm sure many of you know, as these kind of Jewish communities, right? They were enforced Jewish communities, forced into being by the Nazis, who were trying to isolate Jews and make sure that they were, couldn't be united with non-Jews in order to resist, and making sure that They suffered from early on based on Nazi ideology that posed Jews as like this dangerous threat to Germandom. And so, you know, they isolated Jews, but for the most part, in most of the ghettos, um, as long as Jews were not doing things that were openly not allowed, like resisting or you know, trying to get you know, information out to the world, or you know, stealing and you know, trying to escape, obviously those kinds of things, as long as they were kind of doing what the Nazis expected them to do, which was to kind of live peacefully in the ghettos, you know, suffer obviously through poor food hygiene in the ghettos, but generally to do what was expected of them. They had a fair amount of freedom, actually, right? Just in terms of a daily experience. They had to work, but there weren't, you know, watchtowers everywhere. In fact, Germans didn't like going to the ghettos because they were filled with disease and, you know, terrible hygiene. Of course, it was enforced by the conditions put upon them and the lack of resources that the Nazis you know, didn't allow in. But in any case, it was not a pleasant place to be, and most Nazis, in fact, didn't like being there at all. So, as we know, they relied on Jewish councils, they relied on Jewish police, other Jewish organizations, right? These were basically small cities in the larger ghettos. There are also really small ghettos that didn't have any of this structure. But in the larger ghettos, right, there were Jewish, you know, mailmen, and there were teachers, there were schools, there were theaters, there were musical performances, there were libraries, and of course there was labor in all of the ghettos. So we have some amount of freedom there, and of course what we see as a result of that is an enormous amount of creative output, including diaries. And so people had some space to be able to write their stories, although it was difficult and they were, you know, undergoing such horrible conditions, but there was an amount of space. So I thought these ghettos are really this interesting kind of liminal space between, you know, freedom and not freedom. And so I started investigating ghettos. I ended up deciding to focus specifically on the Warsaw Ghetto, the Lodz Ghetto, and the Vilna Ghetto. A lot of this was practical because there's not a lot of surviving archival material from smaller ghettos. Not surprisingly, larger ghettos, there's more surviving documents, and so I kind of did that, but also saw some really interesting comparisons amongst the three ghettos. So that's kind of how I focused in. And so the question, like I said, was the question I came with was, you know, we know so much, like I just said, about how the ghettos functioned, why they were created, and the kind of bureaucratic makeup of it, both from the Nazi side and the Jewish side, the Poles, right, the Lithuanians. We know a lot about what happened, but none of the research that I've ever seen, and that still stands to today, has looked at the ways that Jewish victims living in these ghettos with some amount of agency to sit and write their stories, and sometimes to rescue their stories. Nobody ever has looked at how they thought and felt about perpetrators. And to me, this actually, the more I've thought about it over the years, the more it actually seems like almost another form of perpetration, because to assume that, you know, the Nazis and Jews are just the victims, which I think is what's at the core of that, takes away so much of the agency that people actually had when they were writing, right? They didn't have agency necessarily to change things in their lives, right? The diarists I research, almost every one of them died in the ghetto or at the end of the ghetto. A few were deported to camps, but, you know, they couldn't change their fate, of course. But the fact, you know, they sat there and they wrote day after day after day these emotional, rich, thoughtful diaries, not only, you know, recounting what was going on, but really questioning, who are these perpetrators, right? Who are these Germans that are doing these things to us? Why are they doing them? Questioning, like, what does it mean that the Germans are doing this? Or what does it mean that we have a Jewish police and a Jewish council that are participating, right? What does that mean for our community? What does it mean for us? What does it mean for me personally? And so to me, that was just a really important part that I thought it still surprises me that nobody's really investigated. So that's what I did. I investigated what did Jewish people living in these ghettos have to say in their diaries about perpetrators. And what I found pretty early on, I researched around the world. I researched at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. I researched at the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research in New York City. I researched in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, also the Ghetto Fighters House in Western Galilee. And I visited, although I didn't need the documents there because they had copies at the Holocaust Museum in DC, but the Ringelblum Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw. So I went around, I tried to find every single diary written in Yiddish, which is my research language, and of course the Mamaloshon, the mother tongue of the Jews that were living in these ghettos by and large. Even those who spoke Polish, which were many of them, also spoke Yiddish as their mother tongue. So I found every diary I could possibly find from these ghettos, and I found about 40 or 50 Yiddish diaries that ended up surviving. So we know that there were thousands probably of diaries that were written, even in Yiddish, even in these ghettos. There are of course other diaries that have been published that are written in different languages or from different ghettos. Camps, even concentration camps, diary writing during the Holocaust is much bigger than this study. But my group was about 30 to 40 Yiddish diaries, everywhere from 1 page to 200, 300 pages long, depending on how much survived. Most of the diaries we have are not complete in that, and I'll talk about rescue in a few minutes, but in that it was very difficult for people to rescue their diaries, especially as we know, because most of them did not survive. So yes, we have partial diaries for partial periods of time. And I chose diaries because they are two main reasons. One, they're daily, right? So again, not everybody writes every day, but they are at least contemporary with what's going on. So people are writing very close to the experiences that they have, which at least kind of, there's always construction, right? People have to choose, I'm going to write about this today or that today, and they leave some things out and put some things in. But they are, because they're so close to the events, they're at least kind of a raw reaction to what's going on, as opposed to something, a memoir, so let's say written 60 years later, it's going to have a different perspective. And then second, so because they're daily, they're fresher, and they also demonstrate, and this is important, change over time, right? How do they respond to things as they're happening? And that's just not recoverable in any other kind of source. And then the other reason is because, of course, they're in some ways the most intimate of sources. So the diaries that I have used and that I found many are like a personal diary that anybody would write. They just happen to, of course, be about this particular experiences of this particular time and place. But other people wrote very clearly because they, witnessed what was going on around as this massive historical rupture. And so I'll give one quote from Herman Crook, who's one of the diarists I looked at a lot, and I will say a little bit about him in a moment. But so Herman Crook was a man who was a writer, a librarian who was living in Warsaw. And at the start of the war, he escaped the Nazi onslaught in Warsaw by fleeing to Vilna. And he went to Vilna, which was occupied by the Soviet Union and therefore not under Nazi control yet, not until 1941. And so he began writing pretty much right away. And we have his diary from 1939 until 1944. Herman Crook was chief librarian in the Vilna ghetto and part of the underground movement, both the partisan movement helping to gather arms for a potential uprising, but also part of the the so-called paper brigade. And there's a recent book out that's amazing by David Fishman that talks about the rescue that these Jewish intellectuals in the Vilna ghetto did for Jewish texts and documents that they tried to rescue from the ghetto from the Nazis. In any case, that's Herman Crook. And you can see, no, you can't see. I'm looking at my slideshow, but you don't have it. So yes, he was born in 1897, but he died in 1944. So his is one of these most tragic stories in which he, the day before so he was deported at the end of the Holocaust, at the end of the Vilna Ghetto in August of 1944. Anybody who was surviving, which was a very small number of the original 70,000 Jews in Vilna, was sent to labor camps in Estonia. So he was in Kluga labor camp in Estonia, and the Soviet Union, the Soviets were coming to liberate the Jewish camps in 1944, and but the Nazis decided at the last minute to line everybody up for murder, right? To line up the remaining Jews and to kill them, and so Crook was amongst these Jews, and he had written this diary, thousands of pages, right, throughout almost every single day for 5 years, and he had already sent parts of it out of the ghetto. He had friends outside the ghetto, non-Jewish friends who took some of it. He was part of YIVO, so he had sent some of his papers through friends to New York already. So parts of his diary already survived, but he had been writing still in the Kluga camp as well. And so what he did is he's like in this huge line where they're just doing shooting, and he met up with 6 of his friends, and he gathered them and he buried the diary, and he said, if anybody should survive, please uncover my diary. And sure enough, one of his friends managed to survive the last of the shootings and was able to go back and recover the diary. So Crook did not survive, but his thousands of pages of diary did. It is available in English translation, and it's really quite a remarkable text. But Crook, for example, was writing a diary that was less personal, although of course personal things come in all the time, but he also wrote to keep a witness of what was going on. So he says early in the diary, quote, "I make a firm decision. I leave myself to the mercy of God. I'm staying. And right away, I make another decision. If I'm staying anyway, and if I'm going to be a victim of fascism, I shall take pen in hand and write a chronicle of a city. My chronicle must see, must hear, and must become the mirror and the conscience of the great catastrophe and of the hard times. I have decided to write a chronicle of the events of Vilna." So you can get a sense just from his story and from the fact that there were thousands of people writing how important it was for people to keep the witness and to keep the story alive, knowing that they would likely not survive, and yet they wanted people to know what had happened to them in the ghettos. And so in my research, I see this as kind of a moral imperative to continue reading, to continue trying to understand their experiences, for me through the lens of a historian, but also bringing these experiences to audiences like yourself, people that are interested in understanding a little bit about the felt experience of daily life. And so what I generally found in these diaries is that the way that people really understand perpetration and perpetrators during the Holocaust is missing a lot by not having the Jewish reaction to it. And what the Jewish reaction has shown me, and what the book argues, is that suffering in the ghettos was caused mostly not by the final solution, which didn't exist for most of ghetto life because it wasn't determined really until 1942, but also it's hard to get information, right? There's a lot they didn't know. So the suffering was caused, yes, by the general program of persecution, but specifically from all kinds of hundreds of different daily events and daily persecutions that they experienced. So my book brings out these different types of persecutions to give an idea of what daily life felt like. And so I kind of reorganized the idea of perpetration, right? It wasn't just, being starved and then being sent to a camp, but rather all kinds of mundane things that you wouldn't think of. People that just took advantage for the situation, Poles, Lithuanians, but also Jews, not even necessarily Jewish council members, but just people in the ghettos who were who organized all kinds of programs to take advantage. Persecution that happened at the administrative level, again, even within the camps. An enormous amount of robbing by locals, by Germans, guarding, right? There were whole groups of Polish, Ukrainian, Lithuanian, Jewish, and German guards that worked together at the gates of the ghettos. And this was a really important spot of terror in the ghettos. And then, of course, the more physical things, beatings that took place regularly, carried out by Nazis, and then eventually rounding up, which was a participatory event between Lithuanians, Ukrainians, Germans, and of course Jewish police, and then of course ultimately killing. And so what I try to get at is the totality of this experience, which was a lot more complex than maybe we typically think about. And finally, the thing that came out more and more as I was writing, researching and writing, is that when these diarists were writing about perpetrators, like I said at the start, they were very worried about their own humanity. And what I see is that as they wrote about all kinds of perpetrators, right? And it wasn't just the Germans, it wasn't just the Lithuanian collaborators, and it wasn't just Jewish councils or police, but it was all of these people at different times when they saw these people carrying out all this persecution, and when they witnessed it or when they experienced it, they tried everything they could to separate themselves out and to demonstrate in their writings, just for themselves, right? Or for us, if you're writing a chronicle like Crook, how they were maintaining their humanity in the face of the perceived inhumanity of perpetrators. And this was a constant in and out of their diaries, constant grappling with this question of, are we still human even though we're experiencing this kind of persecution? And how can we separate ourselves, maintaining our humanity when there are so many perpetrators around us? And so I will leave with just one short quote from Abraham Levin, which I found enormously powerful, part of how I end my book. And he says, so he's in the Warsaw Ghetto, and he wrote this in 1941, so this is even before most of the deportations out of the ghetto to Treblinka, just regarding about a year and a half of ghetto life. He says, quote, "We live in a prison. We have been degraded to the level of homeless and uncared for animals. When we look at the swollen, half-naked bodies of Jews lying in the streets, we feel as if we find ourselves at some subhuman level. Yet, we wish to live on, to continue as free and creative men. This will be our test. If, under the thick layer of ashes, our life is not extinguished, this will prove a triumph of the human over the inhuman, and that our will to live is mightier than the will to destruction, that we are capable of overcoming all evil forces which attempt to engulf us." And so, though he's talking about physical survival here and elsewhere, he also means spiritual survival, the spiritual ability to maintain humanity in the face of this persecution. And I argue that through these diaries, that's exactly what they're trying to do. And so reading the diaries really gives their voices the agency that they were trying to, right? They were trying to demonstrate their own humanity, and we have to pay attention to it, to read it, in order to understand really some of the truths of Jewish experience in the ghettos during the Holocaust. So thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Amy. We have time for maybe one or two questions, so if anyone would like to ask a question, this will be an opportunity. Liz, if you can just come up closer so we can have Amy hear you. If you'd like, you can use a mic, or you can just project. I think that...
I'm a teacher, I can project.
Okay, sounds good.
Just wondering if you studied any children's diaries and how they were different from the adults.
Yes, no, that's a really good question. I have a few teenagers who feature in my book, and yes, there is a pronounced difference between the teenage and adult diaries. The teenagers, while aware of the kind of chronicling nature, they do talk about, if anybody should read this, they're aware that they're writing historical documents, but they're also much more personal. They tend to deal with more about their day-to-day experiences, whereas like Cook's diary, he's talking about experiences, but only occasionally is it about himself. So they're more self-centered, and I don't mean that in a bad way. That's what a diary is, right? The teenage diaries are more self-centered, and they reveal a lot more about family relationships, and sometimes the breakdown of family relationships, but also sometimes the strength. They reveal more about friendships, right, as they really talk openly about friends, family, and relationships. They are sometimes, but not always, more emotional. And in fact, I found that to be more of a gender difference than a age difference. But some of the male diaries are super emotional, and some of the female diaries are very kind of straightforward. So you really do have a mix. But yeah, I would say that the types of things they're interested in writing about tend to be slightly different for the teenagers.
Thank
Do we have any other questions? Yeah, yes.
Do you teach a class at Michigan State about the Holocaust?
Oh yes, I teach, so my regular rotation, I teach 2 classes per semester. Right now I'm teaching my Holocaust narratives class, which is about, it starts with diaries, but it ends with, post-war. We do a lot about oral testimonies, and just different ways that, and memoirs, how people have told their narratives and the trauma that remains after the Holocaust. And I'm also teaching my basic Holocaust survey, so Holocaust history, I also teach a senior seminar about the Holocaust in American memory. So about, specifically developments in the US after the war. And I teach European Jewish history, which is fun because it's the only one of my classes that isn't all about persecution. It's also just about things that Jews did in Europe in the modern era, kind of up until even after the Holocaust too, and recent trends. And then finally, I teach a Jews and anti-Semitism course, which takes anti-Semitism from the Bible until today. So, of course, the Holocaust is a case study, but we also investigate a lot of other aspects of anti-Semitism.
How do your students react to your classes?
They find, most of them come in with very little prior knowledge, and they find it completely eye-opening, surprising, shocking. They're shocked that they didn't know all of the things I'm telling them. They all think they know about the Holocaust, and then they come in and a lot of them have never even heard of the ghetto, for example. And so it's an enormously rewarding experience for me to see people from all kind of walks of life really engaging. And they are surprised, and they are very glad that they have learned about it from my class. And the anti-Semitism class, right, with all the things going on in the world, they're also shocked and appalled, but also glad that they understand better what's going on.
I have one final question. So in my studies of Holocaust and genocide studies, it was in a Jewish context at a Jewish college. So all of my colleagues were Jewish. I'm curious to know, at Michigan State, what is the makeup of your students? Are they predominantly Jewish? Are they predominantly not?
Yeah, so they're not. I have more Jewish students than most classes have because of the topic. So at the most, I have about a third of my students that are Jewish. Some classes is less. This semester, I think I've less, significantly less, especially in my freshman class, because all the freshmen have to take one of these seminars. So up to a third. And in the Holocaust class, I do teach, about other victim groups, and we talk about that. A lot of students are very interested because they may identify with some of the other groups, and so they're always allowed to carry out research projects on other, other people that were persecuted during the Holocaust as well. And that's also something that they're always surprised about. They're like, "What? Jehovah's Witnesses? I never knew that, they were persecuted during the Holocaust, and, Roma and things like this." But in other classes, it's all about Jewish history, memoir, related to the Holocaust.
All right. Hey, last questions. I think we're pretty much at the time spent. All right. Thank you so much, Amy. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, I'm going to.
I wish we had a bigger crowd.
some of them, some people watch.
When I
All right. So tomorrow morning we're going to be reciting the full Misha Berach list of names. I'll ask if anyone would like to add any names to that list right now. Otherwise, we'll be reading the full name of lists for our Misha Berach tomorrow. Would anyone like to have any names read aloud tonight for the Misha Berach? Yes.
Al Kamen.
Al Kamen. Don Rocks. Rocks. Vox. Rocks. Like in a rock. Brox. Okay.
Marsha Kaufman and
Marsha Kaufman.
and
Stuart Kaufman. Any other names?
Sure. Larry Eisner,
Larry Eisner.
right? Sharon Lewis,
Sharon Lewis.
thank you. Gabriel Levesque.
Gabriel Levesque. All right. Are there any additional names? No? Okay. It is our custom to please rise as the Misha Berach is read aloud at the very back of our Sidurims. All right. Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBrecha Le'imotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBrecha Le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. We remain standing now for the Aleinu prayer found on page 30 of our Sidurims. The Aleinu is on page 30 of our Sidurims. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol l'tein gedula liyotzeh breshit shalo atzadik higia ratzot velo samanu kimishpachot ha'adama shalo sam kelkenu kachem v'gor aleinu kichol hamonam v'nachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'maitim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim Akadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu Notei Shamayim v'Yoser Haaretz, Umoshev Yekaro b'Shamayim ima'al, Ushchinatu zo, B'govei miroimim, Hu Eloheinu ein od, Emet Malkeinu efesulato, Kakatu betorato v'yadata hayom v'hoshivota el avevecha ki Adonai hu Elohim b'shamayim mimal ya'aretz mitachot ein od. Page 31. We therefore open you, O eternal our God, soon to behold the splendor of your might. Then will false gods vanish from the earth, and the idols will be utterly cut off to heal the world through the sovereignty of the Almighty. Then will all acclaim you as their God, and forsaking evil, turn to you alone. Let all who dwell on earth acknowledge that unto you every knee must bend, and every tongue swear loyalty. Before you, O eternal our God, let them humble themselves. To your glorious name let them give honor. Let all accept the yoke of your dominion, that you may rule over them soon and forever. For the dominion is yours, and you will rule in glory, as it is written, the eternal will reign forever and ever. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz. Vayom ha'u yeh Adonai echad. U'shema be seated. In just a moment, I'll be reciting names from our Yortzeit list as well as members of our community who have recently passed. If you'd like to have any names added to our Yortzeit list or to our list of names of members of our community who have recently passed, please say those names after the names have been read aloud. Recently passed from our community are the following names: Jacob George Tobel, Peter Lizama, Stan Perlman, David Schneider, Raphael Marcus, Florence Schneider, Sylvia Tannenbaum, Florence Gottmacher, Philip Moret, Bruce Fleischig, Eleanor Harris. Our Yortzeits continue with the following names: Ruth Schneider, Eugene Kurland, Mary Tuman, Henry Appelman, Francis Offenberg, Manuel Steinhoff, Celia Scheff, Ruben Stumacher, Anna Jacobs, Elliot Drobin, Sam Rothman, Ellie Kaufman, Louis Balstein, Louis Peck, Francis Stopek, Sidney Richmond, Daniel Peller. Are there any additional names anyone would like to have added to the list?
Irma Roth.
Herman Roth.
Irma.
Irma. Sorry, I got it wrong. Yes. Lee Benner. Yes. Stephen Rozovsky.
Fred Kellogg,
Fred Kahlo.
Judy Merman,
Judy Merman.
McDonald Smith,
McDonald Smith.
and Larry Burchard,
Larry Burchard.
and Gail Marcus.
Gail Marcus. Are there any additional names anyone would like to have added to the list that was read aloud? The words to the mourner's Kaddish may be found on page 33 of our Siddurim. If it is your custom, please rise. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah V'alma tivra tirutei v'yamlich machutei V'chayechon v'yomechon u'fayei d'chol beis Yisrael V'aygala v'zman kariv v'imru amen Yahei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam olamei almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitraman v'yitnasei V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei d'kurusha b'reichu Le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechamata Damiran v'alma v'imru amen Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya B'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen Aseh shalom min romav V'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort all who are bereaved, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. I'd like to invite up Liz for our short but uplifting announcements.
Please uplift us.
You wanna do it?
He's on strike, he has a lot of free time.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat.
Saturday, April 15th, Torah study and worship, virtual and in person. Listen to the new times. Torah study 10 o'clock, worship 10:30. The parking lot is under construction. Please enter and exit from the exit side until Tuesday. Matt Medium, the adult learning group, starts Monday, April 17th at 12 p.m. Feel free to bring lunch with you. Operation Wedding, a documentary about Russian Jews trying to escape Russia, Sunday, April 30th, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. at the Monroe Township Library. Registration is limited, so please call our office or register online. Mother's Day coffee sale. More information on weekly email. You have to place your order by Wednesday, May 10th. Social Action Mother's Day gift drive to benefit Women Wear Shelter. Gift card drop-off is in lobby. More information on weekly email. At the Yom HaShoah, the rabbi will be presenting at library on April 18th. Unfortunately, all the tickets are gone. They only can hold 100 people. Social Action is April 19th. Education Committee is April 19th. Holocaust Service, 5th to 7th grade leads April 21st. That should be very good because the children are going to be reading paragraphs about Holocaust survivors from our community. Student Shabbat, April 22nd, and the Bat Mitzvah of Sabrina Singer is June 3rd. Thank you.
Yes. We'll now join together for Adon Olam on page 34 of our Siddurim. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nira Yeit Nasa V'Chevzo Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nigra V'Yakar Trei Kiklot HaKol Levado Yimloch Noira V'Hu Haya V'Hu Hoveh V'Hu Yiyeh B'Tif'ara V'Hu Echad V'Ein Sheni V'Hamshi Lo Le'Machbira V'Li Reishit V'Li Tachlit V'Lo Ha'oz V'Hamizra V'Hu Eli V'Chai Goeli V'Tzor Chevli V'Yetzara V'Hu Nisi Oimanos Li Menat Kosi B'Yom Ekra B'Ya'ado Afkid Ruchi V'Yetzi Shan V'Ya'ira V'Im Ruchi G'V'Yatzi Adonai Li V'Lo Ira. Good Shabbos, everyone. Good Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. I'd like to invite up Stephen to lead us in the Hamotzi as well as for our Kiddush. Good Shabbos, everyone.